We are now recording. So I'll kick off with a little bit of context. So from work that I've done over the past few years, what I found is there are great examples of communities building sustainable housing, and indeed sustainable communities which incorporate a variety of different uses. So at this point, I'm going to share screen, and I will run through this. Tell me if this is working. Can I get us? Oops, hold on. Can everybody see that okay? Any thumbs ups? Yep, thumbs are happening. Thumbs are happening. Yes. Excellent stuff. Right, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so let me just get this onto that one and that one. So there are great examples of community building sustainable housing all over the place. Regrettably, most that I've seen seem to be overseas. There are a couple of examples here which are both in Vienna, although we do have good examples of community-led housing in the UK. And we've got Lilac on the left there and Ouch on the right-hand one there. So this event takes a kind of locally focused look at this issue around stuff which is going on and has gone on in the past in York. And we'll be looking at 3 York projects, one which is historic and 2 which are current, to ask why we don't see more of it in the UK and to try and identify some of the roadblocks which make it so rare. So we've got 2 other presenters in this evening, which is James, who's there, away from James, and Rebecca, who is sitting there in the evening moonlight, there, who will come on to in a moment, and me. So I'm Phil Bixby. My background is in community-led housing. I'm just going to mute some noise bits there, right? A background in community-led housing, and particularly working with community self-build in the UK many years back. The advantage of being very old like me is that my professional career stretches back into the mists of time when all sorts of interesting stuff was happening. And this is back in the 70s and 80s, which is some pioneering community self-build that was done by architect Walter Siegel, mainly in Lewisham, but elsewhere, which was finding ways to enable communities to build homes for themselves, people who are in poor housing, by simplifying building construction. The kind of stuff that I got involved with in shortly after that period was looking at how we could use more conventional forms of construction to still enable people who are in poor housing to build homes for themselves, but to combine it with providing them with construction skills training, potentially then employment in the construction industry. Through that whole period, we had there was government assistance, and I'm using the term with inverted commas on it, in the form of rolling loan funds and various other sources of funding, which was never really used because it wasn't just about the money. What we found through this period was that it wasn't just that people couldn't afford to do it. There were other issues around the need for broad support on things from finding land, bringing a group together, helping it structure itself, and managing the resources of people, materials, and of technical knowledge. Many of the schemes that I was involved with used a procedure called self-build for shared ownership. What happened there was a housing association, or registered provider as it's called nowadays, would work with a self-build group. It would provide them with technical support, it would provide financial backing, it would provide access to government grant funding, and it would provide access to land. The mechanism allowed rental with a share in the ownership. So basically what happened was the scheme was structured so that there was a gap between the cost of the scheme and the market value. The cost was eventually then turned into rent. The gap between that and the market value, which was had to be about 25%, became a share in the ownership that the self-builders got. Is what's called sweat equity, which sounds very mucky, but is actually basically the 25% gap between the cost of the scheme and the market value of it. So just to gallop through a few examples, this is, first one is a scheme up in Middlesbrough, which did, called Brunton's Manor Self-Build, 22 local families, all living in terrible accommodation, all unemployed when the scheme started, all with jobs at the end of the day. Scheme in Hartlepool for, I think, 16 units up there, again, people coming from poor accommodation locally, all unemployed, and again, all had jobs by the end of the scheme. This was a little scheme I was involved with up in North Tyneside with a group of young people who were working through a Barnardo's project in the area, all in poor housing, a number of them vulnerable. Sue, the lass in the middle of the picture on the right-hand side there, had a young child. All sorts of problems. They built homes for themselves, and again, a number of them came out of it with building skills and with a job at the end of the day. And then through to this one, which is the one just down the road. So some of you will recognise this, although it's obviously the landscaping's grown up around it. This was the Holgate Park self-build down the road on the former ABB site, which was done with a group of 12 local young people working with York Housing Association. I can see John in the audience tonight, so this must bring it all back to you, John. If you need to start weeping, then just turn the camera off.
Yeah, I'm weeping.
We'll talk about why in a moment, but this was done under that same model. There were issues with all of these schemes, and just to kind of go through them. So to say the equity that the self-builders got in the scheme at the end of the day was the gap between the cost and the value, and that was always a slightly precarious thing. We're used to the fact that property values are always going upwards all the time. That always means that cost overruns are still okay, but it was a worrying process. The participants often saw them as market housing. So in terms of the kind of homes that got built, in many cases, they were very, very deeply conventional kind of houses. They were effectively the things that people would like to be able to buy from the Barrettses and Persimmons and whoever else is of this world, but they couldn't because of being unemployed and not having the resources to access the conventional market housing, but they wanted something that looked like it. The third issue was that groups came together on the basis of need with a variety of backgrounds and skills. So it wasn't as if you were kind of assembling a group on the basis of the skills they had, technical knowledge they had, the ability to manage themselves they had. The group was what the group was, and anybody working with the group, such as myself as a project manager or architect, had to try and then make sure people had sufficient skills in all that range of abilities to be able to do the scheme. And the last big issue was that there was a need to connect these projects with a range of different bodies, with housing associations, with councils, training providers, often a mix of regional funding bodies. So it's horrendously complex in terms of putting the projects together. On one scheme up in, the Middlesbrough scheme, we had funding from Employment Action for training, we had task force funding for training, we had Development Corporation funding for on-site training and management, we had City Challenge funding, which went towards capital funding, plus we had grant funding, and then we had the borrowing from the Housing Association. So about 6 different sets of funding, all on one scheme, all of which involved different boxes needing to be ticked in terms of what it was about the people taking part that made them eligible for the funding. So it was a nightmare. And in York, in particular, we were working with a young group of people. Some of them really kind of in late teens, some of them not far beyond that. Most of whom had never had their own home, most of whom had never worked as part of a group where they'd taken on specific roles and had to work collaboratively. And most of them had never had to develop and implement their own structures for making decisions and ensuring that their collaborative vision for building the homes was followed. And the result of that was that the scheme reached the point during the construction process where the self-builders had to be taken off the site and a contractor engaged to complete the construction. We ended up with a situation where factions within the group developed, where the site manager was effectively being challenged on a daily basis about what he was trying to get the group to do, where we considered the project was starting to become unsafe. And on that basis, we had to make a painful decision, and this was the only scheme that I was involved with in years of doing this, and of course it was one just down the road from me, where we had to pull the plug, take the group off site. And what happened was that a contractor went in, finished the scheme off, and because the contractor's costs were higher and the housing association therefore suffered, the cost of the scheme went through the roof. The self-builders got, at the end of the day, the opportunity to rent the completed homes, but basically on the same kind of basis if they had been any ordinary tenant, which meant they still had a right to buy, but they lost a lot of the benefits they would have had the scheme gone the way it should have gone. So just to kind of round up this kind of extended intro, my kind of take on this is that community-led building, and certainly self-build, has tended to work by assembling existing organisations as partners in complex relationships, and by trying to align existing programmes, whether they're about home building or about training or about job creation, rather than creating dedicated new routes which actually fit the kind of things that we want to do with the kind of people we want to work with in the kind of places we have to work. And I think that kind of is, I don't think that has changed. Certainly what's happened with community self-build is that by the end of this period of where you saw the slides there, community self-build pretty much ran into the sand. I don't know of much in the way of community self-build going on now. So I think, yeah, my takeaway from all that is that what we needed then, and what we still don't have, are specific routes for funding and for government support, which enable community self-build, other sorts of community-led housing to happen. So on that cheery note, I will stop sharing. And I'm going to hand over to James. I'll pick up on any questions. If there are any questions that you have, shove them in the chat box and we'll pick up on questions further on in the evening. So James.
Hi there. Sorry, I just had to quickly dash and stop my dog from squeaking at the door. He wants to be involved. Yeah, thanks, Phil. I need to share my screen, don't I? That'd be good. Cool. Hold on before we do that. Better. That's better. Share my screen now. Can you see that okay? Is that all right? Is it big enough? That's the question. Is it full screen? How do I do that? Anyway, hopefully that's...
It was on that option, James. It said full screen.
There we go. Thanks, look at that. The community-led housing sector helping each other out even with technical problems. Right, thanks, Phil. Really interesting intro. Also, I'm very mindful that Phil's been doing this way longer than we've been doing it. So he's been way around the houses, and it's yeah, exactly. So it's a wonderful thing. But yeah, so my name's James Neward. I'm a director of Yorspace. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our experiences of trying to get a community-led project. You know, we're not necessarily a self-build, but we're a community of people coming together to build our own homes. And I know the focus of this evening is kind of on sustainability, but I think, you know, it's important to focus on the context for, you know, what we commonly talk about as the housing crisis, because that's predominantly why lots of people try and set these things up. And I know Rebecca will come on to talk a bit about that too, because, you know, I think it's clear for me, if we're going to achieve sort of climate justice, we need to simultaneously deal with that divide in society, you know, around access to land and housing and things, because this kind of underpins our ability to be sustainable. Otherwise, low carbon homes only become something for people that have got lots of money to do. So, so I'm going to spend a bit of time sort of setting the scene. I won't spend too long on my soapbox. And then, yeah, and there's quite a lot of detail in these slides. I'm really happy to share them afterwards. So I'm not going to spend too much time. There's some good stuff in there, I think. But as I was saying to Phil before, I find it very hard to stop to try and concisely say what we're saying, because I've got lots to say. So yeah, so I thought it was just worth sort of setting the York context for why Yorspace set out. So Yorspace is a community land trust, and we set out in 2014 really to try and sort of deal with what I mentioned as the housing crisis. You know, when we set out, the average house price in York was £240,000, which is 10.5 times the local salary, which is £24,000, and that represented that average amount represented a 300% rise in 20 years, and like no one's salary was going that way. So it really sort of drove at home, you know, how expensive. York's a bit of an outlier in Yorkshire too. Like Shelter dubbed it the most expensive city in the north when we set up, and there was a press article in 2019 that sort of said that there's no affordable homes for first-time buyers. So and COVID actually exacerbated this, because, you know, remote workers, London, Edinburgh, they've relocated to York, and that's driven house prices and That's fed rental demand and rental growth. I'm a renter, I'm experiencing these things too. I've just had a lovely letter from my letting agents telling me that they're delighted that they're going to charge me £50 a month extra every month for the next 12 months. So and that buy to let market as well, what further exacerbated the housing crisis. So in York, the rent rises were third highest in the UK in 2019. So it's that buy to let market is booming, and those high rents, the increase in cost of living, we've all heard about the gas rises today or this last week, and those crazy house prices, you kind of get stuck in this Bermuda Triangle, and lots of people are kind of lost in it. So we kind of came around that idea. There's other factors too in York. It's not just housing. We're in a beautiful city. We've not got a local plan. We've got conservation areas, lots of restrictions to why we're not building enough homes. So York's quite a difficult place, and that's what we've come to find to build homes in. And I'm just going to do a bit of signposting, if that works. There we go. To a couple of good films that explore this. So there's a film called Dispossession, which is a really good recommendation for the national picture on this. A portion of the problem in the UK is this hangover from the right to buy in the 80s. We just didn't replenish that stock. The right to buy legislation ultimately means that affordable homes find their way onto the open market, and that's a huge problem. And so, because there's no current approach to house building that offers any meaningful increase in the percentage of affordable homes in the UK. So, help to buy schemes, they don't really do that. They just put people in more debt. But also, notwithstanding, the right to buy, York has fallen massively behind on its support. I mentioned about the restrictions in conservation and local plan, but I think I got a bit of a fact that between 2014 and 2019, we were supposed to have built 2,800 homes, and we actually delivered 500. So it's just horrendous. So and also just to plug the film Push as well. It's a really, really good for, it's not just a national problem. It's an international problem. And what they talk about in that film is the huge effect that the financialization of unregulated financialization of housing has had. And that's really, we've kind of really skewed our barometer of when it comes to housing in terms of what's acceptable. I've just put this tweet on here because I saw this the other day. When you talk about house prices rising, everyone's like, great, it's a huge success story. But when we talk about the demand for wages, people wanting more money, that's a bad thing. And it's it just seems that society is not quite, looks at housing in a really strange way. So I'll get off my soapbox now, but yeah, that's kind of, these are lots of factors why community-led housing projects spring up, I think. So, and I'm just going to talk about this very briefly. I love this slide, and people have seen me speak before. I always put this slide up because I just ultimately we're just crap at building houses. We're not building sustainable houses, and so coupled with the fact that we're trying to build affordable houses, sustainability, those two things were always at loggerheads, affordability and sustainability. So it's a real issue. So I just want to talk about that because something I'm passionate about, building from sustainable materials, locally sourced materials. We just need to be getting better at it. And again, that's something that community-led housing projects strive to do much better than the market provides. And when we talk about sustainability, when I'm talking about Yorspace, we talk about permaculture quite a bit, which is this idea of we call it the three legs of our stool that help us inform us make decisions. So, being environmentally sustainable, but also being people-centered and making homes, designing them around the user's needs. And we've put people so I'm a future resident in Lowfield Green, the site that I'll come on to talk about. We've put the residents at the heart of those decisions that are being made about the housing, and they buy into this. And also there's issues of affordability. So being fair in how we price houses and being fair about how we build them. So that kind of underpins a lot of what we do. As an organisation, Yorspace is also committed to One Planet Living. So this is some of our residents of the big One Planet Living ball that was doing the rounds, or globe that was doing the rounds in York a few years ago. We're committed to that. And again, I mentioned in the slides, there's a link to a framework that we use to track our sustainability as a community at Lowfield Green. So what does that mean in sort of practical terms? Well, we're a group that I mentioned we formed in 2014. We're a community land trust, like I say. We set up to build better housing, but we started out as a group of small people that lived on the same street, having dinner one night and met some people in the pub. Let's set up a community housing group, and we have lots of meetings. We're fueled by like shared food, tea, and lots of post-it notes and cake and that kind of stuff. And we did start off small. We've got nearly 500 members now, and so we talk about those principles of sustainability, affordability, and social change, and lots of people gather around that idea. And we think that we can, as a collective, as a group, we can take on those big challenges of the housing crisis and climate change. So we've put One Planet Living principles of permaculture right at the heart of what we do, and building the community is a big part of that. So I'm just to talk about some projects. Oliver House was a council-owned building that went on sale at the back end of 2014, start of 2015, and Yorspace had been around for a little while, and we'd explored trying to get some land off a private landowner, unsuccessful in some funding, and we thought, well, what are we going to do next? And this building came up for sale by City of York Council, and we mobilised ourselves. We worked with people like Phil and other people in the local community around this site, right in the centre of city centre in Bishop Hill. And we came together on this idea to try and take that building and convert it and turn it into 14 affordable flats, and create like a community hub. Like we had community, like this image shows here, like community allotments we're proposing, and we didn't really mean to do it. We kind of we ended up doing quite a lot of community engagement around this, and we ended up campaigning. It's not something we set out to do, but we kind of started to realise that we need to start making a bit of noise about this, because engaging the council seemed like a good way for us to try and see if other people are interested in what we're doing. So we did a huge amount of community engagement. Lots of press, radio, host public meetings, and talked about our approach, collecting members, investors, supporters, those types of people along the way. We're trying to put forward the case that this is the kind of thing that Yorks needs to tackle this crisis that I was just describing. And this, in very simple terms, this was our message. Like, let's start putting profit before. Let's start putting community before profit, because otherwise, if the council are going to do that, they're just exacerbating the problem. So we very politely but very publicly shamed the council with what they were doing with this building. Unfortunately, it didn't pay off. We were challenging them to sell this building not to the highest bidder, but ultimately that's what they did. Because the biggest barrier for this, and I don't know, I'm sure Rebecca and Phil, is that access to land. Like there's been like a few false dawns, like I mentioned with Yorspace, and in terms of finding sites, we've looked at 5 now. So Oliver House was our second, and we just sort of campaigned with the council to say that start prioritising land and buildings for community groups, because that's the only really way. That's the thing that underpins all this, is that affordability of land and affordability of housing. So if we can find a way to circumvent the market, this is the best way for us to make affordable housing. So ultimately we were unsuccessful with that site, but the council had listened, and so sort of fast forward a sort of couple of years or a year or so later to the site that I'll talk about now, Lowfield Green. This is a council-owned site in Acomb. This the bottom right hand corner is our site. This is a wider site of 165 homes, and we're part of that development. Our 19 homes that we're building is in the middle of that, in the southeast corner of the site. And these are this is the view of what we're trying to build. This is an aerial view. So I'm talking about Yorspace here, that's I'm representing, but we're working in partnership with Lowfield Green Housing Co-op, who will be the future residents. I've got a split personality here. I'm a member of both of those organisations, and I'll come on a little bit to talk about that relationship. But basically, Yorspace is the landowner, and Lowfield Green Housing Co-op is the co-housing community that will live there. So full planning was approved for the site in 2019, and what we've got there is 19 homes. It's a mixture of 1 and 2 bed flats, 2, 3 and 4 bed homes, with a common house. So that's a communal building where we've got shared facilities. So for us to get together to watch films, manage meetings, have shared meals together. It's Phil mentioned or had a picture of Lilac. We were hugely inspired by Lilac and how they took on those issues of affordability, sustainability, and community, and that's what we've tried to do with. So a lot of what they've done has inspired us there. So yeah, this is the view of what we're trying to build. And this is a nice shot of I think of our community hub. That's what we want to do. We want that place for outdoor socializing. I mentioned there's community meals, but hopefully this is going to be a hub for future developments, like Yorspace has ambitions to do more than just one, and so passing on that learning from this first generation of Lowfield Green residents to pass that on. So this is our hope. The homes have been designed around One Planet Living principles. I'm not going to have a huge amount of time to go into those, but I just, like I say, there's some notes that I can share afterwards, but I thought I'd just go into some of those. This is a shot of the sort of car-free shared street that we've got. We're trying to make the homes, you know, nice to bring a family up in. So yeah, so thinking about those things of affordability, community, and sustainability, and thinking about our community. So we designed these homes so that they were that they had a visual connection to that community space, and there's actually more outdoor shared space than there is private outdoor shared outdoor space. And you know, I mentioned about those shared facilities. We've got like a shared laundry, again, that helps us be more sustainable. Also, you know, we have our post in the same point, so we've designed in ways for us to bump into each other and be a community and share facilities and things. So we've designed in loads of cycle storage because we've only got 12 car parking spaces for 19 homes. So that for me is the thing that sets out our store for the type of community we're trying to build here. And so yeah, we've engaged the residents in those decisions. So that's kind of like our community side of the project. Affordability and fairness. I don't think I'm going to have a huge amount of time to talk about our model. I hope I do, but we're adopting this mutual home ownership model. I mentioned around the issues of right to buy, but we've implemented this affordable home ownership, shared ownership model, which I'll hopefully come on to talk about. That was at the heart of what we're doing in terms of the decisions we've made as a resident group. And then finally, sort of sustainability. So we are committed to building low carbon homes with sustainable heating and renewable energy. But the key thing for me, and this is my own personal thing, is the materials. Like we're making really good waves in making our homes energy efficient in use. I think we're doing great ways. Passive House has done some fantastic things in promoting that agenda. But really, like building things that are natural materials, locally sourced materials, low embodied carbon materials that sequestering carbon is really, really, really important. And we've been working really hard to find that balance with this. So I mentioned that the three legs of the stool, like, and those things being at loggerheads, like, unfortunately, these materials are more expensive than more unsustainable toxic materials that we tend to insulate our homes with. So yeah, so you know, and the common house, I'll talk about this very briefly, the single story community building. I'll just skip that very briefly. The building here with the green roof, where we that's a huge luxury item for us as a community, and so we've got plans to build that as a genuine outright self-build and engage a local college, build that from straw or hempcrete, some really low carbon materials that are locally sourced. So we've thought a lot about the materials and what we're going to do. So hopefully that gives a flavour for what we've done in terms of setting out to build the homes. There's a link here that will link to this framework that we use. Like I say, I won't have time to go through it today, but if you are interested, it's a live document. You can view it. There's some really good stuff in there of how we've made decisions along the way, which I think hopefully gives a good insight into what we've been doing. Around 16 minutes, I'm not doing very well here. So I thought I'd bring it back around to this, to the housing crisis. So this is where I'll talk a little bit about our model and Yorspace's particular niche in this. So developer-led housing isn't delivering affordable homes. Why would they? It's not. They want the house prices to rise. So we're sort of innovating a new way to produce affordable homes, and specifically finding ways that don't find their way onto the open market. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do when you're trying to make them affordable when you need funding. So you know, throwing more subsidies isn't working. Giving the developer subsidies isn't working. So innovating in how we finance housing is really, really important, and that's what Yorspace are doing. So this is our model. So this is broadly how we work. We pull together different stakeholders and work with the community to develop our plans. So with Lowfield Green, that's what we've done. And our long-term aim is sort of to create a series of these schemes. So we're actually in partnership at the minute talking with Rebecca and what she's trying to do with Ophouse. And so our long-term aim is to keep a series of these communities, and because we're powered and led by the people that live there, there's a real sense of community ownership there. And I think that makes us make better decisions because we're not just based on the bottom line. And so yeah, so our main aim as a CLT is to sort of take council land and put that into community ownership. So our structure means that once that land comes into CLT, it's protected, it's asset locked, it's in there, and then we then give that land over to communities to build their own community-led housing on it. And so that's our model. In terms of how that's worked at Lowfield Green, so we issued a community share offer in our CLT. So we offered an opportunity for people from the community we borrowed money from the community basically to build the homes, and we dubbed this the community bank of mum and dad. One of the biggest barriers to home ownership is the deposit, and so this was a really good way for Yorspace to lower the deposit demand for the residents at Lowfield Green. So it made the homes cheaper, the deposits lower, and it allowed the community to have a stake in it. Like a lot of ethical investors have put their money into this, and it gives them a better return on investment in savings than they're getting in savings, and they've got that feel good factor. And obviously, it's as safe as houses as well. So what could possibly go on? There's a bit of a summary there of how we did, but the headline is we raised £422,000, which I was advised recently, or I was told recently, that's the best share offer that's been delivered in the UK for housing, which is a very nice to hear. And we did a huge amount of work to make that happen. And that's kind of another thing I wanted to talk about in terms of some of the issues with doing this. So this was a photo taken on the night of our share launch for our share offer in 2019. And me and my friend Sue, so this is one of the best things. So like the best and worst things of this project is, so me and my friend Sue now, we've been friends for years. We were brought together by the great thing that was happening at Lilac. We were in York. We said, let's make that happen in York. Come to realize how difficult it was to make that happen, like really bloody difficult. So for us to work together, we wanted to not just help ourselves but others. So for us to come and be at this launch was an amazing thing. So the share offer launch, we were hugely successful, really proud of that. But one of the biggest issues for this is, and a personal story for me, is that I had a huge burnout, and this is one of the biggest factors for these types of projects, like trying to squeeze this in between your day jobs, like taking annual leave to go to meetings with the council, like just running yourself ragged. Like I had a huge burnout and I had to take time out. And I was actually joking about with this image with Sue about 3 weeks before I popped. So it was very, very clear it was on the agenda. And I think, this is one of the issues with community-led housing. It can chew you up and spit you out, and it's you have to have a lot of determination and support. And so that's definitely a barrier. I know you want to hear about some of those issues, and I think I'm happy to answer any more questions on that. Really happy to talk about my personal experience in that, but it's been others in the project too. Again, there's not too much time to focus on this particular slide, but this gives a good picture for all the stages involved. Now, in an ideal world, you work your way around this in the wonderful streamlined every step donkey. But actually, in reality, I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but actually, in reality, what's actually happened is we've just gone all over the place for 7 years trying to make this happen. And fatigue is a big issue. I mentioned about the burnout, but it can take a long time, and you lose people and new people come in, and you have to teach them all about the very complicated ownership model we've developed and all these things, and it can be hard work. So you have to sort of strap yourself in. And interesting though, I will just say on that, I know time's an issue, but with regards to how long it takes, the average development time for housing in the UK is 7 years. That's not just community-led housing, that's across the board. But because developers have got different sites going on, it seems like community-led housing takes longer. I don't think it does. I think there are barriers in the way that can delay it. But actually, in reality, I don't think that's one of the things that people dismiss community-led housing, is if it's something that, that's one of the reasons to not pursue it. It can't solve the housing crisis. Have a look at some of those features on that slide when Phil shares it afterwards. So it can take a long time. So where are we up to? So we've been ready. I feel like we've been ready to start on site. I've been talking about us being in Christmas 2018, Christmas 2019, Christmas 2020. We've kind of stalled a little bit, really. Brexit, COVID. We're hoping to be on site last year after the share offer closed January last year. We're hoping to be on site in the summer. We were heavily dependent on some funding that didn't come off, which I'll come on to talk about. We also lost our contractor 2 months ago. COVID got the better of that organisation. So we've had to go back out to tender in the last 2 months, which going out to tender in the current climate with Brexit, COVID, doesn't bode well, but we've got some tricks up our sleeve to try and value engineer and make the project happen. But so we got our prices back on that next week. So fingers crossed we hear some positive news on our budget. So, but our target is to be on site this year. We need to start paying our investors back. And I have a 6-month-old daughter now, and I'm fed up of renting accommodation. We've all our community having babies at the moment. All our Lowfield Green Housing Co-op, like Sue's due in a couple of months. I've had my daughter, so we need to just get this moving now. It's been going on too long. So yeah, so we're at an interesting time with the project, and I'd be happy to talk in sort of questions. You know, the design hasn't evolved the way that we'd hoped. You know, we are building from natural materials, but not locally sourced materials. There's some things like that, and I could talk quite candidly on that, how that's gone. But yeah, I'm going to try and wrap up, Phil, if that's okay. Yeah, am I all right for a few more minutes? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So yeah, so one of the issues that that held us back is the community housing fund. And I mentioned about the issue around right to buy. One of the things that Yorspace have really tried to do with the project Lowfield Green is to avoid the right to buy. So if we take grant from the government, there's a right to buy that property, and we don't want that. You know, Phil mentioned shared ownership and there's affordable rent too. There's other models where you can access funding, which would have hugely helped our project. But what we're doing at Lowfield Green is this mutual home ownership model, and I'm going to very, very succinctly describe what that is. So it's a method that you don't own your home directly. Me as a resident moving in, I become a resident member of the Mutual Home Ownership Society, and I own the co-op collectively with my neighbours. I don't own my house outright, and we manage that co-op together. When I move in, I put down a deposit, and I start paying my monthly repayments similar to how you do with a normal house, and I start to accrue equity. Some of that goes off to finance the loan, some of it goes off to finance the shareholders for Yorspace. There's a lease between Yorspace and Lowfield Green, and each resident pays proportionally for the size of their property. The difference in this is from standard home ownership is that when you leave, you can't sell your shares on the open market, and the co-op controls the value of the shares. So it doesn't matter how much these homes are actually worth on the open market. What they cost to build is what they cost, and that retains that, and the co-op makes sure those homes don't rise with local house prices. They rise up 2.5% every year. So the beauty of this is that we recycle the affordability we're baking in now from generation to generation to generation. And so that's unfortunately not what our government wants to fund at the moment. And the Community Housing Fund was a really, really key bit of legislation and funding that allowed us to do that. They allowed us to innovate. So we've been really, really sidetracked for that. We're £855,000 down at the moment. So we've had to really, really sort of rethink our project. So I've got a collection of slides, which again I won't run through in any detail, but the headline in this is that we've decided to go ahead without the funding. We've explored loads of options over the last 12 months. We've even explored trying to make mutual home ownership look like shared ownership. If everything's linked to the market, everything's about people staircasing out and owning the house outright, and it's not something that the Lowfield Green resident community wanted to do. So they've committed to doing mutual home ownership, even though costs have gone up. So there's a few bits here what the outcome, but one thing that I just wanted to sort of focus on here is this slide. So I was trying to describe it there. Because we've made this decision to do mutual home ownership, the homes are only going to get more affordable. Like if the market continues at the rate it has in the last 20 years, these homes are just going to be, so in 20 years time, if I decide to move on, the next people that move in are going to have such an affordable place to live. And that's really, really important. They can live affordably in a sustainable community. And Yorspace has a priority for allocating homes to people in housing needs, so people that are renting, people that can't find a house on the open market. And so we're really, really, really proud of MHOS, and we're really pleased that we've persisted with it. But it's been a big issue. The call me pessimistic, but the government doesn't want it to change. They don't want the market to change, because quite a lot of them own second homes. So why would you? And the sort of final thing really to finish on is this issue at the minute now. Where do we go next? Like, the temptation is to do it quick and dirty and get the homes built no matter what. So we've got some really, really interesting conversations ahead when those prices come back next week. And this is how much do we stick to those principles? How much do we kick one of those legs of the stool out? It's going to be a really important thing. And I think that's probably a good point to leave it. Yorspace do have more plans. Like I say, we are speaking with Rebecca. We're speaking to Ophouse. We're looking at other ventures York Central co-own. But yeah, I should probably stop because I'm on 27 minutes now, Phil. So I think you said 20. So yeah, I'll stop talking now. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Many thanks, James. That's great. So yes, any immediate questions, or can we roll questions up until the end and ask Rebecca to talk a bit about Ophouse? Let's ask Rebecca to talk a bit about Ophouse. So James,
I'll stop sharing. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, clear your slide off. And Rebecca.
All about putting this together at about 4 o'clock today. So apologies if it's
After the
really
course. Great stuff.
disconnected and ad-libbed. But let me see. Yeah, there we go. So I think, how do you do a view? Present. There we go. How's that? Thumbs up. Okay, we've got a little animation that we can watch all together, and it's just a minute long, and it saves me explaining things because we condensed it all into one little 1 minute thing. So I'll let this play and then I'm going to talk.
Have you ever felt frustrated with the housing market? Us too. Many of us have no choice but to settle for expensive, low quality, carbon guzzling accommodation. That's why we've decided to take some radical action. For social, economic, and climate justice, we need practical and equitable housing solutions. Ophouse proposes tiny ones, developing self-built tiny homes shaped by the needs of the people who live in them, creating options and opportunities that democratise home building by putting the control back in the hands of people. Playful, creative and proactive innovation unlocks space and time to enable communities to thrive while living within the boundaries of our planet. Interested? Go to ophouse.co.uk to learn more.
Oh, that's nice. That's my brother's girlfriend's voice. So it's nice to hear her voice. So yeah, we want to make housing for people. We want to make it affordable, and we want to make it sustainable. We've been sort of, I think I'm at a stage now where I can say I'm on the front line of the housing crisis. I live in a van. I am technically homeless. I am trying to do that whilst also bringing up a child who's 8 years old. And but I think the one thing that really keeps us going is the fact that we've got a community around us. So I'm not on my own in a van. We've got a group of us who live here, who are all going like this, yeah, in the background. And we dot ourselves around York. We make the best out of a really quite shitty situation in York, which has completely squeezed us out of being able to live in a house. So yeah, I think James summed it up pretty well and soapboxed it beautifully, as he always does. But yeah, we've got a bit of an issue. How can you make housing sustainable whilst at the same time making it affordable? And we've been talking about the bottom line quite a lot this evening, which is community-led housing can make more ethical decisions. We can make more democratic decisions. We can come together and think creatively about how to solve really, really challenging problems. But there is a bottom line for communities as well. Like, we're all scraping the barrel for how we can actually afford to build housing. Like, Yorspace have taken a massive hit with the community housing fund going offline and then coming on, and then the government just messing around with everyone. So I think we just need to be really aware of that bottom line, and like not saying like it's really hard, because it's reality. we are living in capitalism, and we are having to play this game no matter whether you want to or not. I think that like the biggest, most radical decisions you can make is like to just say that I'm cancelling rent and I'm not doing it anymore. And I think that's what a few of us have decided to do. It's very freeing, but also it's going to be really cold in winter. So what are we going to do? So build some houses is the answer that we've sort of come to. It's a balancing act. It's really difficult to get that balance right, I think. And I think permaculture, as James, I did have the exact same slide that James had up for permaculture, because we made it together, because that's what we do. So I've taken it out, but yeah, I really do think permaculture is the way to try and help, like just a framework for helping us try and work out this crazy balance that we have to get to, because it is a tightrope that you're walking when you're trying to do anything community led. So yeah, we're trying to build radically affordable homes. How do you do that in York, in one of the most expensive cities to live? We think we need to be designing and building them with and not for people, and within the boundaries of the planet. So we've got quite a big task on our hands, and it does feel quite lonely at times, which is why it's really good to be part of like a wider sort of nationwide group of people or network. So I've just started doing the community-led housing enabler training, which is really brilliant, and I'm meeting people. There's people from the Hebrides and there's people from London and Cornwall and there, and I think, yeah, I think a thing that we really need to take away from this is the fact that it's not just York, although it feels like we're really in this like city narrative at the moment, whereas like York is ridiculously expensive. I've just finished reading a book called Homesick by a woman called Katrina Davis. Very much recommend that to anyone who's interested in this sort of stuff. Katrina's wrote about the Cornish housing crisis, so she lived in a shed. She's coming up for York Design Week for a really amazing both gig and talk. So if you're interested in how community-led housing or like solving your own housing needs, then come along to that event. I think it'll be really good. So tangents. Yeah, this is just to illustrate the fact that this is very real. This is my van. It's called Camelot on the top there, you can see, which is quite funny because it's really small. It's not a castle. So how do we make housing sustainable? I feel like these guys know the answer. I've been all week doing workshops with kids at Burton Green Primary School, which is just opposite our first development, which is at Moral House, which is an old care home that the council decommissioned in 2017. I think renovation is going to be the way forward for a lot of really sustainable community-led housing projects. Our initial plan was to take the site and knock it down and build loads of tiny houses like we want to do, but then we realized that was just a massive ego trip that we were all on, and that we needed to think about what we had in front of us and use what we had to make something really amazing that can serve the same needs of the same community. So we're looking at Moral House at the moment. These guys this week have just been absolutely amazing. They've been designing the community space. They've been thinking about what kind of activities they want to do. There's just so much energy in that area around like how can we make our how can we all work together to make our lives more fun and enjoyable. And yeah, I've just been completely blown away by the by the kids. So this is Moral House. Opposite here, there's me having a really nice time with a group of children who are in year 1, I think this was. We were doing I Spy and they were all telling me things like they could see bricks and windows and roofing tiles. So just I think what my heart's telling me is that sustainable building for future is getting kids involved now in thinking about what housing is and what it could be. And sort of, it can be really doom and gloom. Like, I cry a lot about it because the housing crisis is really personal for a lot of people. My little boy's, I'm separated from his dad, but his dad's now been told that he's got to move out in December. His landlord has decided that he wants his house back, and that's it. There's no negotiation, there's no talking about it. It's the home that you've lived in for the past 8 years is no longer your home, get out. And I think that's a massive problem that we need to overcome. So yeah, I think that's one of the big reasons why I'm really like wanting to do something about this, because people are making decisions about our own homes without consulting us, and people are building homes without actually asking who you're building it for. So because I'm homeless, I get to go to a really nice gym because I can afford it because I don't pay rent. But next to that gym, they're building lots of 3 and 4 bed homes, which are all built out of brick, and they're all definitely not passive house, because I've seen them being built, because I've been watching every day what they're doing. It's shoddy. We're building homes that are not fit for purpose. They are too big, and they are not places that have been thought about in a way that are built for people. And I get so angry every time I go to the gym now, because I just see all of these like ridiculous houses being built by like, yeah, speculative developers, let's just call it that. But I've had a really fun summer trying to get persimmons back up, so I kind of don't mind. So yeah, that's all the slides that I've got for today. But I think it would be really nice just to hear other people's voices in the room, and just hear why people are interested in this topic, and just have a bit of a conversation really about what we can do, because these are just our ideas of what we might be able to do. Ophouse originally, as I said, set out to do, I'm going to stop sharing, set out to build tiny houses, and we still are, but it's that access to land again, and then like getting that land with planning permission, and then just the increase in the cost of the land when you do get the permission. So if you want to if you want to turn land into housing, you have to spend a lot of money on trying to get it so you can get planning permission. But if you don't want to do that, then you can just spend lots of money on land, and that's not accessible. Like, we haven't got accessible spaces. There's so many private, yeah, I don't want to just rant. It would be really nice to talk to you all. I prefer just chats.
Okay, let's open it up. So anyone who's got questions or comments they want to make, then fire away. I've got one to start with, really, Rebecca, which is about, is this a specifically UK problem to do with how housing is kind of monetized in the UK? And in the same way that I've been kind of gawping at kind of community housing porn and seeing lovely stuff in Vienna and Amsterdam and Copenhagen and all these other places other than the UK, are there other countries where you look at where the kind of chunk of housing provision that you're interested in, this kind of small, flexible, affordable housing, is done better?
I think the only relative thing I can think of is in the Netherlands, and the only thing I know a lot like more about is these projects in the Netherlands that are self-build is a really normal thing to do there. and land is made available for people to, like, plots are coming out of your ears in the Netherlands for, I mean, it's still expensive, but relatively to, you know, they actually look after people's well-being, and they have like really good wages in the Netherlands, which we unfortunately don't have. I work within the arts, so I'm just in trouble on lots of levels when it comes to like partaking in society. It's a very difficult thing to do. So yeah, I think the only sort of comparable thing that I know of is Minitopia in the Netherlands. So when we originally set out with Ophouse, we spoke with Rolf and Tessa, who work at a project called Minitopia, .eu, if you want to have a look at it on the internet. But that's very much experimentation, like what they're doing. But there's other places like Almere, which is just outside Amsterdam, which are really brilliant sort of examples of how you could do it. There's so many different brilliant examples of how you can do it. It's just like, how do you scale it? How do you actually like make this mainstream? Because what we're talking about, permaculture, for example, really needs to just be like a mainstream thing that everyone knows, because then we can be like, okay, that's our base. Where can we go from here? But it's not, you know, you're not allowed to teach anti-capitalism in schools anymore. So what are you going to do?
Okay. Anyone else? Got any comments? Dylan, you're clearly not calling in from a conventional living room there, so we've got to take on this.
No, I do live in a conventional home. I'm just happen to be in a camper van.
Well chosen surroundings.
I didn't get the memo. I'm just in a house.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the most interesting thing that's happening where I am is the Phoenix project in Lewis, which is this land that was bought by developers and then more developers, and they finally given up because it needs big flood defenses around it, and there's a lot of local energy behind. There's a group called Human Nature, or architects and planners and so on, and they want co-housing to be the first element of that gets built, a co-housing block. So that's 11 acres in central Lewis, which is a very expensive place to live. So that's a really, really exciting opportunity. They've just got to work out how to fund the flood defences first. Yeah, as I said, I'm really impressed with Yorspace, and particularly the way that it's not, the emphasis on financial sustainability, I think, is quite inspiring. And I'm not surprised that, you know, they've been so successful in raising funds, because I think it's instantly, I looked at the website, I was like, yeah, we should do it like that as well. But our group is quite keen, is quite big on the permaculture side of it. But I think the financial sustainability is the part that really gets people, because it's such a big need for people. So more of a comment.
There have been a few examples of kind of community share issue in Yorkshire, haven't there, James? Both, there's yours, Leeds Community Homes, Headingley Development Trust. Yeah.
Calderdale Valley as well. They did a share offer to buy a building. Yeah, I think more and more people are seeing it's quite interesting, and it's really, I'm very, very quick to say this isn't to demonize people that are owning homes. I think this is that we had to sort of tread this balance when we were doing the share offer. Like some people were really aggravated by the community mum and dad idea. They were like, what's this, you know? When you start speaking to people at those events, we did loads of events to promote that offer. You speak to people and they're like, I'm putting money in because I haven't got any money to give to my kids to help them onto the ladder. And I think there's more and more people are going, oh yeah, great. I'm not bothered about the money, that return on investment. I mean, this is one of the things that I do bang on about, is like, if you want to be sustainable and you want to be ethical, think about where you put your money. Because if you're putting your money in a high street bank, you are fueling and funding all kinds of sinful things. And so think about where you do put your money. And what we offered people, 2.5% on the investment. Okay, it's going to be a slow burner, but I think more and more people are coming around to that idea that, where can I put my money? Where can I do stuff? Thinking about ethical banks, thinking about putting money. We've even gone to an ethical lender, that the Phil Green was speaking to Ecology Building Society, and one of their premises for lending is that you build sustainably, and that's what we're doing. So there's loads of reasons that they were the perfect lender for us to go with. But I think more and more people, it's that power of sort of pooling your resources, isn't it? Like, there's people in our project at Lowfield Green that wouldn't be able to afford the deposit on an open market, and some of them can't afford the deposit for our scheme, but because other people are putting more in, we can drop them so people can get in, because we're sharing our resources. So I think there's a real thing in there about people collectively putting their hands in their pockets and saying, I can give you a bit of my money to help you out there. I think I'm happy to do that.
Sarah, or Angela, as I apparently should be calling you again, you've kind of found your way now into kind of a role within the community-led housing movement. Has your kind of increasingly broad perspective of what's going on out there, has that given you any insights into things which you think should be happening in order to enable?
I do feel, actually, funnily enough, we had a steering group away day yesterday, did the hub, and kind of off the back of that, I'll be honest, felt a little bit deflated, only because you kind of realise that there are so many barriers. And I literally feel, having just listened to Rebecca, when we go to the new unitary authority in North Yorkshire, to actually take Rebecca with us and to actually listen to a person who is at the sharp end of this housing crisis. And I just feel that, I just think it's like, in terms of policy, the government says one thing, what they say and what they do is two different things. And there has to be policy not only in national level, but local level. So just enabling community-led housing to happen at a local level in terms of land value. I mean, what they do in Holland, for example, they take land at agricultural value and they actually pass that on for housing. I mean, unthinkable. In this country, we have agricultural land, goes to the hands of a land agent, he gets planning permission, it goes through the roof, then Persimmon get their dirty mitts on it. And it just infuriates me, because I think we don't look at housing now as homes. We look at it as an asset class. But I think, I'm inside now. I've got insider knowledge of this. And we've had conversations in the past, Phil, and I'm just as frustrated as ever, is my honest answer. I just don't know what's going to change. I'm quite hopeful with Richard Bacon's report that was commissioned by Boris. Whether or not they take any of that on board is another story. Richard Bacon is a big advocate for self-custom build, community-led housing, but it's just yet another report. Where's the support in the funding, in the framework? Anyway, I will get off my soapbox now, because I could go on all night.
It's a great night in the pub with you and me, isn't it, Sarah?
Yeah. We will have that night in Liverpool, James. Trust me.
We will.
There is a kind of long-term frustration, because James, as you pointed out, I've been in this game an awful long time, and I remember having kind of conversations with Claude Henriksen, who's now involved with his community homes. I was architect for Frontline Self-Build about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, something like that. A self-build scheme in Chapeltown in Leeds, which took 5 years to get on site. Again, I mean, as James has pointed out, that's not untypical, but working with a group of young people who were in poor housing in very precarious circumstances. There were people who, left the group, disappeared off, people ended up in jail and then coming back out and then kind of building their own homes. It was a ridiculously kind of fluid, difficult situation. And that, every now and again, I ended up in House of Commons about 2 years back, speaking about self-build and kind of what it needed. And I just looked back through magazine articles 10 years previously and 20 years previously. I said, we're just saying exactly the same things now that we were saying then. And this kind of cycle goes on and the cycle goes on, and we don't make any progress and we don't learn from what has not worked previously. So yeah, it is frustrating. So yeah, a lifetime worth of great sessions in the pub, whinging on and being spirited about things. But
I feel like we need to go up now. Come on, guys.
yeah, it would be nice, wouldn't it, if things changed?
Yeah, I think so too. And just to steal that thunder from Rebecca, I think what I would say, and the thing that I've is easy to sort of. I mean, a lot of these projects are born out of frustration and annoyance with things that unfold and decisions that people make. And I think that, but we're in that group of people that don't just sit on the sidelines moaning about it. We actually go out and try and do something about it. And I think that's the positiveness in this. So I think I think exactly, Rebecca. I think we just want to make things better. I think. And there's the policy things that Sarah talks about is absolutely true, but I think there's whoever I speak to about what we've been doing or what other people are doing. I mean, look at Home Baked in Liverpool, absolutely just amazing inspiration, and the way that they're scaling it up. And Liverpool's got a huge rich history in cooperatives and those types of things, but just truly inspiring. Another one to check out Home Baked if people haven't come across that before, and it's something that Yorspace want to take inspiration from, and not just housing, like doing other stuff as well, community businesses, taking real proper ownership of things. And there's the thing with COVID that sort of stalled things, that you haven't been able to get in a room and get that buzz of a room when you're in a room with people. You come together and have a public meeting, and like just making a cup of tea before the meeting starts and chatting to someone like over the biscuits and stuff, like meeting those people and making those connections, everyone feeling energized after a meeting. We've lost that, and now things are picking up and we're starting to meet more in person. You get, hopefully, the community that we've all seen during COVID starts to resonate more within this kind of community activism that I think is, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm in those circles though, but it feels like more and more of it's happening. So yeah, hopefully I've ridden that wave, Rebecca, of picking it up.
Anyone else?
Yeah, no, I've just had a long week, and I think we need to just be positive as well as like, what are the barriers, but also how do we overcome them? Because I think we're really lucky in York to have a really amazing community-led housing officer. Like Tim goes above York, what he needs to do to make community-led housing happen in York, and we would not be where we are with Ophouse and probably Yorspace without Tim. Like Tim's role, like whether it was Tim, no, it is because it's Tim. But his role within the council, I think, is just fundamental to making things happen. And I know we can sometimes be a bit frustrated with the red tape that local authorities can bring to situations. But I think, the housing team are trying to cut as much of that red tape as possible. And it does feel like we are working on it together. One thing that I'm just sort of, so I've had a strange summer. We squatted a persimmon site in June. They evicted us immediately, which was quite fun.
I hope you got the press down there.
Oh, there was so much press. It was a bit ridiculous, but we need to be working in partnership with these people who are, because I don't think that Scott Waters, who's the MD of Persimmon, is a bad person. Like, I think that he's just like, has been taught that this is how you do development, and he's going, oh yeah, this is how you do development, and then doing it the way that, economics books tells you to do it. And we've got this issue, like Kate Raworth says this in Donut Economics. She says, like, we've got economists that we are teaching like really old economic theory to. We're not embracing like new innovative ideas within our education system. So how can you expect people like Scott Waters, who have been through a standardized education system, to think radically about how we actually solve this housing crisis? Because he's not gonna, is he? but we need to think about like how do we actually engage with people like him who are, you know, we think they're against us, but actually they're probably, like, from the things they write in their comms stuff, they probably are a bit more sort of open to the idea of community than we think that they are. So how do we engage with people like Persimmon and Barrett and this amazing space homes which are next to David Lloyd's? Like, how do we actually sit down with these guys and talk like on a level that means that they're going to start building homes that actually matter, rather than homes that are just literally littering? Like, it feels like they're littering. Why are you putting those bricks there? They're not useful. Like, I think it's, yeah. We've got to be having conversations with large scale developers, because we can't self-build our way out of this. We can't. So yeah.
I think everybody has a role to play, though, don't they, Rebecca? I think every stakeholder, that's the community, that's these builders, that's the government, everybody should be just working together. So I think we're at a tipping point in this country where, take Richmondshire, I know how bad it is in York, but prices in Richmondshire have gone up 30%. And actually, it's now affecting the economy because there's no workers for these tourist jobs, because people can't afford to live there. And I think people are going to start really rising up. So they've got to start doing something's got to happen. It just has to happen.
You've seen it in York though, this summer, like people, like the students in York have gone, fuck this. I'm not standing for this anymore. Yeah. Like, I don't want to pay £600 for a crap room anymore. Yeah. Like, actually, it's probably more than that. I mean, student halls, don't even go there. But we've got lots and lots of events about this at Design Week this year, and I think the Housing Pioneers event is going to be really good, Sarah. It'd be really good to get you there. I mean, anyone who wants to come to any of the events. But we're going to try and work, like, get some developers in there and like get some tea and coffee and biscuits and then have those conversations. Yeah. I think just listen to everybody, you know, their point of view, and just see how we can find common ground. I mean, I went to see George Clark the other night, and it was kind of a similar discussion that we were having at the Leeds International Festival, and he talked about the planet, and he called it the common home, and it is. We all live on the planet, so it is our common home, and we should really start thinking about our common home a bit more than, you know, Boris talking about Kermit the Frog. You know, we really need to start really thinking strongly, because we won't have any homes if there's no common home. So sustainability is key.
Anyone else want to put into this conversation? Claire, Maria, Nathan, John?
I mean, I don't really have anything to add, but it's a really great conversation to be part of. And, you know, just hearing, you know, you talking, Rebecca, and hang on, I've got to swipe, and Sarah, and talking about how, you know, specifically the talk is about housing, but yeah, it's everything, isn't it? It's agriculture, and, you know, people, you know, farmers farming these lands for generations in one particular way and not knowing how else to farm. And actually we need to absolutely rethink. And so many people are kind of, it feels like we're on a precipice. I hope we are anyway. But yeah, something has to give, and, you know, it needs to give soon. But I'm really glad I came along to today's talk, because I just chanced upon it. I think Phil, are you showing your house this weekend? Yeah. So I think I
green
kind of
balloons ready for tomorrow. So yeah.
See where you are. Nice. Yeah. So I kind of clicked through and saw some of the other things you were doing and saw this talk and thought, yeah, that'll be interesting. And actually, I hadn't quite realised how much it's kind of engaged me. And, you know, we moved here. I'm definitely one of the bad guys. Like, we moved here from London because we couldn't afford London, and we bought something here. And, you know, we moved from a small 2-bed flat with you know, a 4-person family, and we really didn't want to leave our flat. It was perfect. It was small. It, you know, it contained us. And we've moved to this big 3-bed Victorian terrace. And, you know, I think it's becoming home, but we all realise we don't need this much space. It's excessive. And so there's that, and like thinking about my privilege, but also thinking about how, you know, we got here. That was the death of both of our grandparents, and like the loan of money. I'm getting all emotional. Sorry. but it's insane. It's completely unattainable. And sorry everyone.
No, not at all. Don't be sorry. Don't be sorry.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
What was I going to say? And actually, I kind of banded this idea around with friends of mine years and years ago, like decades ago, about how we should get community housing going and, you know, buy our own plot of land, and it will see us out for the rest of our lives. And, you know, and we're kind of there, and we're thinking about it, and you guys are like doing it and living it, and it has to change. This doesn't work. It's so broken. And I was trying to be like a light-hearted there and kind of bring it back, but it's totally failed and gone completely plummeted. So I think somebody else needs to take the talking stick now.
Well, I need to step in and say that you're definitely not one of the bad guys, Claire. Like, and this is
not bad.
This is the nature
really good.
of trying to talk about these things. I think, and again, at the risk of potentially inadvertently demonizing someone else, but like the issue for me is that this is the problem, isn't it? We start we're pitting against each other here, and all we want to do is just find a place for our families to live. And I think that the issue that I have with the market and how it works is that it's just a race to the bottom, because, you know, I know someone who sold their house and they've just sold it, and and they said we got way more than we were expecting for it, so we just took the offer. They now can't find anywhere else in the city to move into. Like the market's crazy, so they're having to move to Redcar for a month while they try and you know, in a caravan for a bit while they try and find somewhere else to live. Now, and they've done that because they've got the money, but in that time that they're not in a house, the house prices are just going up. So it's just like no one's actually better off. So this is the thing, like when we sort of talk about people in it for the profit, like I think we have a really skewed expectation when you buy a house that it rises in value. It's really interesting. I applied to do the Winston Churchill Fellowship a few years ago. Winston Churchill, he's got there's some bad elements to Winston Churchill, but what was really interesting for him in 1945 was talking about the hidden evil of the rise in value. If someone comes into a place, they build a school, they build a new road, there's new shops, and all that investment, positive investment, people's house values are just going up. And he was saying back in the 40s that we needed to watch that. Now, obviously, it didn't accelerate until the 80s when Maggie Thatcher decided to sell off all that the council houses. But you know, I mean, there's so many decisions we've made along the way, and now people put all their money in housing because they know if they sell it off, they can pay for care when they're older, because they're separate from their communities, because they don't know their neighbours and their neighbours can't look after them. So, you know, I'm going off on a few distant tangents there, but there's so many different elements to this crisis, and it's all, you know, it's the environmental crisis, the housing crisis, all these things. So yeah, you're definitely, I just needed to come in hard there. You're definitely not the bad guy in this. I think you know, it's, and again, this is why I was saying about being careful. The second home ownership thing, you know, that has actually just become an issue for our co-op. Someone had applied to the co-op and hadn't appreciated that that they couldn't include their rental income from another property in their financial forecast for whether they could live in our property. And we were like, how on earth can we, as a CLT that's got this land, justify having someone move in when they already own another property? Like, so but that was difficult because they were lovely and they loved the sustainability, they loved the community. We've been working with them for a few months, and no one had communicated clear to them what that was an issue. And we've had to say, I'm sorry, but unless you sell the properties, you can't live here. And it's so difficult, so difficult. So yeah.
I'm conscious of the fact that we're knocking on for an hour and a half worth, and also that Rebecca's on the very dregs of the bottom of her battery there. So we probably need to wind up.
I'm on 10% now, 10%,
Phil. Right, this is good, moving downhill fast. What I'd like to do is to say that what we will do, I mean, first of all, just thank you everybody for your being here tonight, first of all, and for your openness and honesty, and a really great conversation that's happened. What I will do after tonight is get any information and links and stuff like that from James and from Rebecca. And we'll fire an email out to all of you, which will have loads of stuff in there about how you can get involved with the kind of stuff that's going on. So what Yorspace are up to, what Ophouse are up to, what Yoko is up to. There's all sorts of stuff kicking off in York at the moment, and we really kind of need all the people we can have kind of taking part in that and helping to push that along. So there are many opportunities to get your hands dirty and start to see how community-led housing could happen in York. So unless anyone's got anything absolutely shockingly burning which they want to chuck into the conversation now. Yep, we have. Yep.
Just one last thing. Oh, sorry, John. Sorry, now I've spoken loads. Go on, John.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've been interested from my housing association background to see what's happening potentially to affordable housing, and I really find it quite inspiring what you all are attempting to do, and I recognise so many of the difficulties you've come up against, and all I can say is more power to your elbow.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. James, your final
I was just going to
comment.
do a call to arms, really. Just get yourself on the self-build register. The more people that put their name on the self-build register, the more houses local, or the more opportunities. And this is what City of York Council have done quite well here, is that they've dubbed our site a community self-build plot, which means there's legislation that 5% of any housing developed over 100 homes, I can't remember how many homes, has to have self-build in it. That really keys and plays into what Sarah was talking about with the Richard Bacon review on custom and self-build housing, which is basically community-led housing. I would and just get that message out to people, because I'd like to push that to the Yorspace membership over the coming weeks. And coming up soon, the Community Housing Fund. There's the autumn spending review. I know Sarah and I are collating some stuff at the minute to try and put the message that Yorkshire needs some community housing funding, please.
This is the people think that York doesn't need funding because it's such a privileged city, and it really makes me really angry, because it's one of the most unequal cities in the world, actually, because you like York is number 4 in the most unequal cities in the world, and the UK is number 4 in the world as the most one of the most unequal countries in the world. So York is doing absolutely terrible at distributing its wealth, and we need to sort that out. Like, the minute we sort that out, we will be able to sort out the bottom line on how, whether we can use natural materials or not. Like, if we can just distribute the wealth, we can buy the bloody hempcrete that it will take to build sustainable housing, but we can't distribute the wealth because it's trapped. And we need to figure out how it's been trapped and where it's been trapped and address those issues now.
Come the revolution, come the hempcrete.
Can I just say one final thing? Sorry, I was just going to say, this is my final thing. I think it's not just housing, though. Housing impacts so much. So health and well-being is top of that agenda. There'll be so much less money spent on healthcare if we just had more equitable housing. People felt secure.
You're so right. Like, the minute I moved into a van, I was no longer depressed about the fact that I had to pay £900 to Halifax Estates, who own half of York. like I immediately my mental health has gone like, oh, I'm actually okay. Like I'm a human, I can make decisions about my own life. Like I don't have to like answer to the man in the suit telling me that I have to pay him nearly $1,000 a month to live in his house. Like, no longer am I going to do that. And we just need more people to do that. And when the demand is there,
yeah, it will happen.
We need more
Rebecca.
people to go, no, I'm not.
we
for
do.
this anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, I am going to stop recording because